gears here, and we're going to look at environmental influences. And so I wanted to finish those last couple slides on Friday, but we didn't get a chance to. So today what we're going to be looking at is environmental influences. We're looking at Module 12, okay? So Module 12 starts off with talking about, because Module 11 was looking at all the nature stuff, and so that was why there was that evolutionary component and the idea of chromosomes and DNA and genes and all those things. Here with Module 12, we're more focusing on environmental things, so we're looking at the nurture side of things. So the biggest thing that I want to hit before we quit is the influence that your parents have on you versus your peers have on you. What kind of influences do they each have on you? So what I want you to do is that I want you to take about a minute or two, and I want you to discuss in your group, who would you say has been your biggest, the person or persons that has the biggest impact on your life so far? Okay, so discuss in your group, who do you think has had the, for you personally, have had the most impact on your life so far? Person or persons? Studies have shown your parents do have influence over you on some things, okay? Influence over you on your politics. It's interesting because especially when I taught econ before, and I talked about things about policies in particular, politicians. And it's interesting because I've had some students that are very polarized about particular topics because they get it from their parents. I've even had this, where I'm driving along, it literally happened to me. I was driving my daughter to swim practice, and we weren't even talking politics. She's 9, okay? She tells me, Mommy, this person and this person, 2 of her friends, they don't like President Obama. I said, really? They're 9. I'm like, really? Why don't they like President Obama? And, you know, she was talking about these particular things, and one of it, she said, oh yeah, and this other boy in my class doesn't like President Obama. I said, really, why? Because they don't have any money because of him. That was her reasoning, okay? Now, I thought it was interesting because the fact that, again, it shows that her friends, 9 and 10-year-olds, that are being influenced by what her parents are saying at home about particular politicians.
It's that tax thing where they raise the taxes on small businesses, right?
I don't know.
I think they raise taxes on small businesses.
I don't know for sure if that was their particular case. Also, parents influence you on religion. Now, the interesting thing about religion is that this may be to the point of going like the direct opposite. You're like, okay, my parents believe X, Y, and Z, and they're of this particular religion, and I hated it growing up. So I'm going the opposite direction, okay? But a lot of times you will still have some of those theological beliefs within you that maybe still carry through. Manners are huge. So how many of you have parents that taught you, like when you meet a new person, like you know, your friends' parents, did your parents teach you to call them Mr. and Mrs. Smith or by their first name?
Mr. and Mrs. Smith, unless they're doctor, then it's always doctor.
Okay. What if Mr. or Mrs. Smith says, oh, no, don't call me that. My mom was like that. My mom, whenever friends would call her Mrs. Train, she's like, please don't call me that. Call me Diane.
Okay, Mrs. Diane.
I didn't. I still said
I honestly, I would say, okay, Mrs. Diane.
Yeah. My mom dated my stepdad for like 2 years, and I called him Mr. Schickel until like even when they were married.
Okay.
Like it was so hard for me to like call.
Okay.
But there were like a couple people who I had like my mom's close friends that I had nicknames.
Yes, I was going to say, what about your parents' friends?
That's a little bit different.
I call my
Most of them I still called by their last names, but there was one person.
But I would, if they knew I would call them that.
Yeah, there was one person I had a nickname for. That.
Okay.
Well, my
I call my
grandma
dad's
was
friends
just
as the
love it. My grandma was
Okay. What about your, even in your family, do you call your aunt when you talk to her, Aunt Deb, or do you call her Deb?
There's one that I call by her first name.
Unless they've specifically told us to call it something else, I call it.
in referencing it, for me, I don't know that I necessarily talk to, like, in referencing people, I would talk about my parents, my friends' parents in their first name, because that's how my parents refer to themselves to other people. And referencing my aunts and uncles, I would call them by their first names. But like if I'm talking to somebody else, I would talk, my aunt Sarah did blah, 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 blah. So they know who I'm talking about. But oftentimes I would say, hey, Sarah.
So
And see it again. So
it's always
disrespectful for some people.
I call my uncle
I call my
But that's
grandma
different.
Grandpa. That's a nickname. Nicknames are different than their like formal title.
Okay. All right. Also, the book talks about that your parents are a translator of your genetic influence. What the heck does that mean? They are kind of the ones that, okay, they're the ones that if you have specific things going on with you genetically, and like if you are they talk about like your temperament when you're growing up. Okay, and how you are, like, are you an agreeable child? How do they basically treat you because you're an agreeable child compared to if you are a rambunctious child or child that is sickly or whatever? How do they? How do they react to you? Okay, how do they go and treat you because of that? Okay, and some people say that parents should have training before their parents because what happens if you get a child that that is not like you, and they are the rambunctious child and you were the straight and narrow person. How do you deal with that? Because that drives some parents up a wall. They're like, what am I supposed to do with that? And they're constantly punishing them. They're constantly doing the same thing over again. And how you treat them can make a difference. And there have been studies where, how their parents treated them makes a difference as to if they are seen as somebody who's a problem child versus somebody who maybe they just think outside the box. Okay? So that's what we mean by translator of genetic influence. I put it in quotations because those are not my words. Okay.
So how do you feel about
Spanking?
spanking?
Me personally?
Yes.
Me personally, I was occasionally spanked as a child. But for the most part, and we'll talk about parenting a little bit later when we get to developmental, but for the most part, my parents were more authoritative parents rather than authoritarian parents, which we'll talk about what those mean. But I would say that for me, I wanted to say going into parenting that I was like, oh, I'm not going to spank my children. I'm not going to do that. I've done it, to be honest.
So many people say, I'm not going to do this, this,
Mm-hmm.
like,
Yep.
okay.
You don't know until you've been there, and you just can't tell until you've been there, and you have that child that is just driving you up the wall and, and gets to the point where you're just like, ugh! And yes, I will say that it has decreased in frequency for me, but yeah. Okay, like I said, those aggressive children. Yeah.
How do you feel about splitting your child?
With what?
The switch? The switch?
No, I can honestly say I have not done that. No. We'll talk about parenting a little bit later, and what you'll find interesting is that my husband has different parenting style than I have, and you'll find this with your own parents is that if they have different parenting styles, you will know that really well as a kid because you will play the angles, right? You know the one that you can go to when you're in trouble because they're going to be more lenient on you than the other one, right?
The only problem is when they talk to each other about it later.
Yeah, well,
Why
okay,
didn't you tell me?
and they have to have their system played out. They have to have their system organized as far as how they communicate with each other and how they discipline you ahead of time. Because they have to know going in that they have different styles. Okay, what about peers? Peers. Okay, peers influence your cooperation, popularity, style, okay? Your peers, your friends influence you on being able to work together, that cooperation piece. Okay. Obviously, you will always have friends that don't necessarily agree with everything that you do. That's a good thing. Okay. They will also help you with popularity from the standpoint of, knowing, what is in and what is cool to be doing in order to be popular. Okay. Style obviously changes frequently throughout the years, and so your parents are totally not in it with style most of the time. So your peers are the ones that are going to influence you on style, not only on what to wear, but also the music that you listen to, the TV shows that you watch, the movies that you watch. Just popular culture as a whole are going to be influenced by your peers. Okay. I'm trying to remember. Okay, so that whole idea of, and it's funny because you will gravitate towards people that are like you, okay? But it's also interesting because a lot of the times your peers are often also have similar family backgrounds as you. Is that true?
No. My friends all have similar family backgrounds, but they're actually all different than my own.
Like say she's the
Similar,
odd one out.
Similar, like
They have similar backgrounds, but you are the odd
like
one.
my friends, my favorite people, they all have a very similar family background.
You are different from them. Gotcha. I understand.
Yeah, I'm very.
And not necessarily they're all in the same group.
I grew up in the.
Ooh, really? All right.